eye to eye, searching for the reasons why.
Well, here we are today, still in lockdown, and I'm with Josie Laird, who has just written The Gift of Words, which came out in pandemic and is, I imagine, Josie, sitting on your shelves waiting to be distributed next Tuesday. Shall I
Yes,
just
it's
read?
been a bit of a shame.
Yeah. And what have you been getting up to in the lockdown?
I'm still working with some of my writing groups. So we've got support groups that we do short stories, and I've been doing lots and lots of gardening as well. It's great.
There's got to be some silver linings. So I'll just start off and just read a wee bit off the back of the book. The book is called The Gift of Words, and Sharon is a young widow struggling to cope with a drug-addicted son. And then into her life comes a gift, her granddaughter, precious and needing Sharon's help. Can Sharon provide the environment Mia needs, especially since she's hiding a secret? She can't read or write properly. That's a very interesting topic to be writing on. What inspired you to write on this, on the concept of literacy?
I was an adult literacy tutor for 5 years, and I came across a lot of people who they could read and write, but not enough to participate in whatever they were wanting to do. So if they were going on to more study, then they were struggling to write the essays that needed. And I began to realise that some people have missed out through the school system, through no fault of their own, through no fault of their teachers often either. And they begin to think that they're perhaps not all that bright and that they never will be able to learn. And as an adult tutor, I was, that was my job, was to help them realise that they could learn to read better than they did at that moment.
Well, you've certainly written Sharon as a very authentic character, and you've obviously used, you know, your knowledge there really well. But there are other interesting themes in the book. There is a methamphetamine issue with a son and a girlfriend, which is a real tragedy throughout the story. You must have done some interesting research on this subject.
I was very fortunate to be able to go along to a meth expo where a group of people had brought all the different agencies that deal with meth addicts together to be able to share their knowledge. And it busted open some of my preconceptions about what it means to be a meth addict and what it means to be the family of a meth addict, what you can do for them, and what works and what doesn't work. Trying to force them to stop taking it doesn't work. They have to come to it in their own realization.
I mean, the story opens with Sharon working in a fruit store and seeing a small, unkempt child in a playground alone, with no one watching over her, close to a busy road, and rushes over to secure the child, and then learns that this is actually her grandchild. It's a very moving story. It really gripped me in, and I read it in a very quick time. And it's a beautiful story because it's a story of hope, I feel, and the goodness of people.
Yes, yeah. It doesn't really have a lot of baddies in there because it's life that's dealt the blow to Sharon in various ways rather than any one particular nasty person. There are a few that aren't as as nice as you would wish, but it's Sharon's childhood, despite having loving parents, just didn't help her get her literacy up to where you would expect, and for an intelligent person. And since then, nothing else has helped either.
Along the way, she joins various groups, and I found that actually really an interesting aspect of the book, because you've written very realistically about the sort of support that people can find in small towns. I don't know if you want to just enlarge on that a wee bit.
Well, it doesn't mean if we've got problems in our lives that we have to battle it alone. There's others who've gone through that as well. So eventually Sharon goes to Tough Love to learn how to deal with her son. And that's a fantastic organisation that it doesn't matter how old your child is, you're still always going to be their parent, and you might need to learn some different ways of dealing with them that will help both of you, but at least help you. Grandparents raising grandchildren. There's over 3,000 instances of grandparents who've had to take over the care of their grandchildren for various reasons. And although you've already been a parent, so you should know what to do, there's a different dynamic to being a grandparent.
And I'm really interested because your last book, all about Kate, also has a very authentic woman character dealing with a big issue. And maybe you'd just like to talk about this book for a moment, because I found this again a wonderful story of where you really painstakingly get inside a person's head who has a real problem. And again, it's a problem that we might not be thinking or talking about much, but is an underlying influence in so many people's lives.
Yeah, and I think particularly women, not always just women, but most of us have this deep fear that we're not good enough. And it comes out in various ways. Often it's with our weight, with our body, because we are judged so much on our physical appearance. So for Kate, it's that she's a bit overweight, and in her mind, that's a bigger issue than perhaps it really is. So her actions are dictated on the fact that she feels unattractive. She doesn't believe it when her friends and her boyfriend say that she looks lovely, that she's just cuddly. She believes she's sort of really fat and gross and unlovable. And it takes her a long time to realise that she can be loved despite however she feels her body is.
And this is another really interesting thread that you follow in this book, because she's actually an identical twin who was separated at birth from her identical twin sister, who has a completely different, who has the same body type, but a completely different attitude and way of thinking about her life. And I think that was just such an interesting parallel through the story.
I wanted to explain that nurture versus nature, that who you are is dictated by your genes, and then how you choose to deal with that. So for her sister, she's been brought up where her body size isn't an issue, and she's comfortable with who she is. Whereas for Kate, yeah, she was brought up in an adoptive family, and they just didn't understand who Kate was physically.
I think both of these books are just a wonderful standalone read, but I think they also bring real value for anyone who is dealing with either of these issues or problems in their lives. I think they would be a wonderful and quite a comforting read. Is that were you wanting to achieve that in the books?
Yeah, definitely. I was trying to speak to people who are struggling through the same thing and saying, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this, and what happens for Kate or what happens for Sharon. And for the rest of us who aren't perhaps struggling in the same way, but to be a bit more sympathetic, to understand what might be going on in those women's lives.
And you're actually setting yourself up to be quite a prolific writer, because All About Kate came out in 2019 and The Gift of Words came out in 2020. Maybe you can just enlarge on your writing practice. I know that all authors like myself are always interested to know how we can beat the issues that always seem to stand in our way between getting words on paper and progressing stories.
Yeah. Although they came out only a year apart, I already had The Gift of Words written by the time that All About Kate came out. I wrote it as part of a NaNoWriMo challenge. So for those of you who don't know NaNoWriMo, it's every November, people all around the world sit down and undertake to write 50,000 words in November. You break it down into day by day, and that for me it was 3 scenes, so that's quite doable. And the fact that you're challenging yourself, not anybody else, and it doesn't matter if you don't do it, but you like to try and do things that you've set. So it gave me the impetus to get the story down on paper, get that first draft down without getting all critical and trying to second guess myself. I'd go out for a walk afterwards and think about what the next scenes should be, instead of pulling myself to pieces over the scenes that I had just written.
So are you a planner or a pantster? Do you start with a plan in mind, or do you start just from a scene and launch into it?
I am a pantster. It's really interesting to see where the story will go. So I start off with the protagonist and where they find themselves, and then I sort of, what would a person who is doing this do next, and who would they have around them in their lives? And when I was writing The Gift of Words, I found the need for her to have a friend to confide in, rather than just having a whole bunch of narrative that gets a bit boring about her backstory. She had to have a friend that she'd talk to about that, and that was a lovely discovery.
And she is certainly a lovely friend, an old childhood friend who is a teacher and is actually inspiring in her own right, dealing with her own issues and problems.
Yeah, because we all are, aren't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what are you reading at the moment? Anything interesting?
Oh yes, I've had a good pile of books, luckily, and I haven't even needed to venture into the Kindle yet. I finished a trio of Sophies in about one sitting. Eileen Merriman's latest YA novel, and just full of admiration about her ability to write a story like that, her ability to get into the mind of a teenage girl. It was a sort of a mystery story, but the YA aspect of it was particularly well done.
And I think we should say that All About Kate, what age is Kate in the story? It's definitely a YA book, and I feel it would be a great adjunct in school libraries.
Yeah, 25.
25, so, yeah. But a young 25 who's really looking back and still dealing with the issues of her teenage years. Yes, and even The Gift of Words, I think it's got a lot to say to young people. And I think even though the protagonist is actually someone of a grandmother's age, she is dealing with the issues of, young people around her. I think I'd be interested to see whether, what, have you had young readers read The Gift of Words?
Not yet, because not many people have got it.
I'm very lucky. I've got one of the few copies because I managed to pick it up with my gloves on out of your mailbox. That was, I shouldn't really be saying that, should I? But never mind.
There's a couple of neighbours who've done the same thing. So if they can do it on their walk, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, luckily I live close enough to Josie to be within the radius of my nearest supermarket. Luckily for me, that supermarket is quite some distance from my virtual woolshed. Yeah, and so as of Tuesday, people will be able to start ordering it, and you will be able to start sending it out to people in lockdown. So what do they need to do to achieve that, Josie?
I'm not sure that places like Fish Pond and Mighty Ape have got copies of it yet, just because everything locked down so quickly. But if they did try and order online, Paper Plus, our local Paper Plus, I know, has got copies in.
And that would be Pukekohe Paper Plus or Waiuku?
Yeah, Pukekohe.
Pukekohe Paper Plus, yeah.
But I mean, they may not be open. There'll be a retail store, so. But just, visit your local bookstore, independent bookstore, once they are open, and ask for them to get it in, because it is out there. It's available through Wheelers, through the book distribution. And if you're really desperate to read it, then it's also on Kindle. So. But support local. Supports local books.
I think we all need to be supporting our local bookshops as much as we can.
Yes.
Excellent. And so have you got a theme for your next novel?
The next one that I'm writing is a historical novel, and it's about the first beekeeper in New Zealand, named by Mary Bumby, which is quite an amusing name for a beekeeper. She brought 2 hives of bees to New Zealand in 1839. So it's a difficult journey in those days, 5 months on a sailing ship coming from England.
Keeping your bees alive.
Yeah. So I've been having to imagine what she would have done to keep them alive, and then what life would have been like when she sailed into the Hokianga harbour with her brother, who was a missionary. What she saw, what she experienced, and how she lived.
Well, I hope we get out of our regional lockdown soon so you can visit the Hokianga.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to us today. What's the rest of the day going to bring for you?
Oh, it's sorting out the garage day. Because, you know how things accumulate. So
I think
now's the perfect time.
We've all got an opportunity to declutter and actually recalibrate our lives in interesting ways.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for your time today.
Okay, thanks, Kirsty.
Bye now.